In this video, I'm going to emphasize how important it is to code line by line as opposed to coding an entire chunk and then trying to run it. So I've already given one example. In this case, I'm trying to plot a histogram. And maybe I've copied and pasted this from somewhere else and then modified some things, or maybe I've typed it out myself without testing it. And I've typed it all out at once. And in this case, I got this error that is kind of hard to actually figure out what's going wrong. It says that there's a value error, shape mismatch. Objects cannot be broadcast to a single shape. And I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. It kind of tells me it's something wrong with here. It could be something with my bins object. It could be something with my width. It could be something with the hist object. These are all things we've encountered before when we've made histogram plots. But it's kind of hard to tell what went wrong. So either, you could avoid this altogether by coding line by line and inspecting your inputs and outputs at each step. Or if it already broke, then you can try starting over, right? We know the error happened here. So it has to have happened either here or someplace before it, and it just didn't, the error didn't, we're not exactly sure where it's going wrong. So let's try doing this line by line, right? So let's take a line here. In this case, I'm generating some random data that I'm going to use to generate a histogram. Let's look at what the X variable actually is. Okay, so it's 1,000 numbers. There's a single array. We can check the shape, maybe that might be an easier way to inspect it. There's 1,000 random numbers. So we kind of know what the shape of the X data is. That seems to be behaving the way we anticipate. So we could next try the bins object. Right, we can try adding that, and we can print bins to the screen and look at that. That looks pretty normal. I was trying to create, bins of size 1 between -5 and 25. So that looks like it's behaving as anticipated. Then I actually create the histogram, so the counts within each of the bins. So let's look at what hist actually is. And this is where we see that something's gone wrong. So notice that the hist object is actually an array of 2 objects. It's a list, of 2 objects. It has an array that contains the counts, but then it also has an array of the bins. And this is where you have an aha moment. You remember that the NumPy histogram function gives 2 outputs, and we read them into a single output. So it actually saved them. Hist actually is now a list, right, of 2 objects. So hist 0 contains the histogram data, so the counts in each bin, and hist 1 is a duplicate of bins, right? It's the same thing as the bins object. So now you can remind yourself, I was supposed to read out the bins object to a second variable. And I'm going to use this underscore as a throwaway variable. That was the thing that went wrong. And so then you can go, and you should keep doing this line by line. You could maybe, if you're confident, copy the rest of the code and see if it works. But you should probably keep going line by line and inspecting those. So width should probably be a float representing the width of a single size bin. It is equal to 1 as anticipated. We can create a figure next. That you're not too worried about. Figures usually work, but you could run it if you wanted. You can add in the data, see if it works. It works as anticipated. And finally, you could rescale your x-axis to make it more narrow. So that is just emphasizing how important it is, even though it can take perhaps a little longer than, running a chunk of code. It will save you a ton of time when you're not exactly sure what this error message is doing, right? So whenever you run into an error message like this, if you have a chunk of code, remember to go back and cut it line by line. It's better than trying to, reason through your code and being like, I'm not sure what it could be. You could try inspecting your variables. That might be another way to go about it. Instead of looking at it line by line, you could check variable by variable. That's another possible way of debugging. You could see, well, is X what I expect it to be? Is hist what I expect it to be? Is bin's what I expect it to be. And that's how you can go and figure out where the error is. So again, I favor the line by line one. I prefer to write my code line by line and inspect each of the outputs to each line so that I don't, end up on line 1,000 and pop an error. I'm not sure where that is. It could be anywhere between line 1 and line 1,000, right? So if you code line by line, it helps you keep the scope of where that error should be popping up to essentially a single line, the current line that you're coding. So that's a skill that will serve you well in the long run.